JCC of Metro Detroit's 70th Annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair. My name is Brenda Brooke, and I'm Book Fair Chair, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this Wednesday evening to Jewish Pride, Rebuilding a People by Ben Freeman. As you may have heard, this is the 70th Annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair, and we're celebrating with an entire year of book and story programming. Join us as we honor the world's first Jewish book fair, highlighting diverse authors, curating new Jewish writing, and promoting the global art of Jewish storytelling. Our festival, which continues through this Sunday, November 14th, is just the beginning, so be sure to come back all year for exceptional opportunities to engage with the best of Jewish books and authors. To see our full event schedule and watch events you may have missed, you can also find our online store where you can find Jewish Pride. Visit our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. And if you enjoy this event and other book fair events, consider becoming a patron or donating to Book Fair. And you can do either or both of these at our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair. Remember that we rely on community support to make this annual event possible, so I thank you in advance for becoming part of the Book Fair family. The Book Fair team would like to thank the following for their support. Our sponsors tonight, Heidi and Jeff Budai, and co-sponsor is ADL Michigan. It's the Anti-Defamation League. I also want to express my deepest gratitude to the whole Book Fair committee. Your dedication, innovation, commitment, and hard work have made all of this possible. We have an enlightening event for you this evening, and we want you to be a part of it. You can ask questions and offer comments in the YouTube section below or by texting to the number in the corner of your screen. Our speakers have a great discussion prepared, and they'll take as many of your questions as they can. And while you're here at our YouTube channel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the reminder bell, and that way you'll never miss any of our wonderful events. The focus of tonight's event is Jewish Pride, Rebuilding a People. We have with us the author of the book, Ben Freeman, broadcasting from Hong Kong, as well as Emily Snider of ADL Michigan, who will moderate the discussion. Inspired by his experience with LGBTQ+ pride, Ben Freeman educates, inspires, and empowers Jewish people to reject the shame that anti-Semitism has imposed on Jews, as well as the non-Jewish perceptions of what it means to be a Jew. Jewish Pride is the first step to enable people to begin the process of defining one's own identity as a proud Jew through Jewish experiences, history, and values. Ben is a Jewish leader, thinker, and educator born in Scotland. He's a gay Jewish author and internationally renowned educator, focusing on Jewish identity, combating anti-Semitism, and raising awareness of the Holocaust. Our moderator, Emily Snider, is the Associate Regional Director of ADL Michigan and a winner of the Detroit Jewish News 36 Under 36. Mazel tov. Please join me in welcoming Ben Freeman and Emily Snider.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Ben, it's so nice to see you again. How are you today?
You too. Always good to see you. I'm very well. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Much better now that we're here together this evening.
I know.
Well, I'm going to jump right in.
Please.
And please, those who are joining us, utilize the chat feature, the comment feature. We can't wait to see your questions. But right off the bat, what inspired / motivated you to write this wonderful novel, this wonderful book, excuse me?
Yeah, I'm very much not a nonfiction writer, or rather not a fiction writer. I'm a nonfiction writer. I guess there was two journeys. The first was my own journey to LGBTQ+ pride. And like many LGBTQ+ people, I suffered with my mental health when I was coming to terms with my sexual orientation. And there was a moment, probably in my early 20s, which was now about 15 years ago, I'm kind of sad to say, I kind of reached rock bottom. But in that space, in that kind of headspace, I realized something quite important and profound. I had done nothing wrong. So I was being punished for a crime I hadn't committed. And that led me on a path to LGBTQ+ pride. And that path was one of work and one of action. It didn't just happen. I had to do a lot of unlearning, a lot of deprogramming, a lot of learning, and coming to terms with my own internalized homophobia. Simultaneously, I've always been a proud Jew. I was raised in Glasgow in Scotland. My parents worked very hard to give us a strong and proud Jewish identity. And that really continued all my life. There was kind of, ebbs and flows of how Jewish I felt based on what else was happening in my life. But in 2018, I joined Twitter to specifically take part in the fight against Jeremy Corbyn. So Jeremy Corbyn was the former leader of the Labour Party, the opposition party in the UK, and he is a racist. He has been expelled from the Labour Party because of his racism against Jews, and he actively targeted Jewish people. But he said he was targeting Zionism, although many of us know that what that really means. And in that space, in that fight, I saw two things. One of the things I saw was the British Jewish community embody Jewish pride. They were the modern Maccabees. They came together, they said, we're not going to tolerate this. They took to the streets and said, enough is enough. And they never stopped talking about it, even when people tried to silence them. I also saw certain high-profile British Jews not really able to address the problem. They were suffering from what I call the hangover of the keep your head down policy, which is don't say anything, just get on with it. And that space led me to reflect on my own experiences with LGBTQ plus pride, and I realized we as a community need a pride movement. We talk about the Shoah, we talk about modern Jew hate, but one thing we don't necessarily talk about is the emotional impact it has on us as Jews, how it impacts how we feel about ourselves and our Jewishness. So this book is many things. It's a history, it's theory, it's psychological, it's self-help, and it's a love letter to Jews to help them be proud of their Jewishness and only see it as a source of pride and never shame.
I really love that message. Early on, we're taught to feel shame of our Jewish identity because of the actions of others. And I think your book takes a very strong stance against that and is a very important message, especially to our young Jews who are, rolling through the punches of K through 12 spaces where you really do experience a lot of that bullying and that core identity development as well. So it's a beautiful, beautiful message for all Jewish people, but especially for our young folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you kind of hinted at it a little bit, but you dedicated an entire chapter to discussing internalized anti-Semitism, which is super interesting. It's a conversation I found the Jewish community tiptoes around, but doesn't really talk about it. Can you share your experience with researching this topic and any anecdotes that you found that you could share with the rest of us?
Absolutely. And I can also give you a little sneak peek because my second book will be released in November of next year. And it's focusing...
Busy man.
I'm a busy boy.
Busy man during quarantine.
It's true. And it focuses solely on internalized anti-Jewishness. And you're right, we don't talk about it enough. And actually, some people deny that the problem exists. And my perspective is coming again from the LGBTQ plus community. I suffered from internalized homophobia. My friends did. And we had to process that. But firstly, we had to recognize it. There's also a huge amount of really important research that's been carried out by the Black community, particularly in America. And that's, again, really important because this is actually a global experience. It's a human experience. Ours just manifests in specific ways because our experience is specific to us. And I think that this has been a problem for thousands of years. So, we saw in 2015, 16, 17, we saw Jews align themselves with people like Jeremy Corbyn, even though he was alienating, excluding British Jewish people. And 50% of British Jews said they would leave the country if Corbyn was elected, which is about 150,000 people. It's really shocking. But there were Jews who stood with him. And the thing we have to understand, and the reason that I don't talk about Jewish self-hate, I talk about internalized anti-Jewishness or internalized anti-Semitism, is because fundamentally we have to understand it's not our fault. This hate swirls around us and we absorb it into ourselves. It doesn't begin with us. We're not born hating ourselves. And actually, no one is born hating, but we particularly are not born into this, negative relationship with our Jewishness. But exactly as you say, over time, our Jewish souls are chipped away at. The world tells us to be ashamed. They want us to be universal, not specific. how many people in this audience, and I obviously can't see you, but I can ask the question, how many of you have said, I'm Jewish, but I'm Zionist, but I have. I don't come from a place of, kind of moral high ground. This was my experience. I would say I'm Jewish, but, and let's really be honest, what am I meaning? I'm saying I'm Jewish, but I'm not Orthodox. I'm not what, people would consider to be extreme. That's internalized anti-Jewishness. It's not okay that we say these things and we do these things, and it's mostly not okay that we feel these things. And in the book in the first book, I talk about, the one we're here to talk about, Jewish Pride, I talk about kind of the more extreme examples. I talk about the anti-Zionist Jews. So If Not Now, Jewish Voice for Peace. I have an example from the UK, which was Jewish Voice for Labour. And they are Jews who weaponize, who deploy their Jewish identities to harm other Jewish people. And there have always been Jews who will be tokenized because they kosher, they legitimize Jew hate. And there are certain people who might be too far gone in their own journey away from Jewishness. But the reason we have to talk about this is because we can defend against this. We can put a barrier up to internalized anti-Jewishness. And one of the barriers is pride. But we have to recognize, first of all, that it exists. And actually, it's a pandemic in our community. And it doesn't just manifest in an extreme way. I was a proud Jew and I was still saying I'm Jewish, but. So I think it's a really important conversation, and thank you for asking about it. And I have to say, in all of the events I've done, that has been something people have spoken about, because I think that we're starting to be able to have that conversation, because these conversations are not always easy.
Absolutely. And I think we're really at an inflection point as a Jewish community, especially in the United States. We're seeing large Jewish institutions like Hillel International and ADL, AJC, etc., coming together this holiday season for the Shine the Light program. And I know Hillel just ran a campaign, the Wear Your Star campaign, to really encourage Jewish students on campus, on college campuses, to be openly and proudly Jewish and not to feel that shame and reject that shame, and continue to show up as their authentic selves. It's so important.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much about our experience, especially as Jews in the Western diaspora, that goes unsaid. And we do experience shame, we do experience trauma, but we don't really talk about it. We don't really address it. One of my friends just was in Israel and they messaged me and said, leaving is really hard. I find it really hard to leave, but I also don't feel 100% at home here. And I said, yeah, this is the bind that diasporic Jews are in. I never felt 100% at home in the UK. I'm British and I love the UK, love the Queen, but I never really felt fully British. I was always aware that I was a little separate. But then I also am not Israeli. I'm a Jew, but I'm not Israeli, and that's a specific culture. So there's many things about our experience that go unsaid, but they have a deep impact on us and how we feel about our Jewishness and just ourselves more generally. So rejecting shame, having these conversations, encouraging all Jews to feel pride in their Jewish identities and to do the necessary work that is involved in pursuing pride.
Absolutely. I think your book talks a lot about intergenerational trauma. And it's very common. I know I've said this before. My dad historically says this at Passover. They try to kill us. They didn't. We won. Now let's eat.
Yes.
And it's very funny. It's a joke. We make a joke about it. But we don't really sit and talk about, that intergenerational trauma and doing trauma-informed work to dismantle the coping mechanisms that we all collectively have because of that experience. Can you talk a little bit about that process in the larger process of owning your Jewish pride?
I really love that question, and I think that you're absolutely right. And it's funny, and it's also very typically Jewish to be like, they tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. It's very classically Jewish. But there's actually something quite dark, in the layers underneath that, and we don't talk about it. We just accept that it's part of our experience. And in every generation, there's people who try to destroy us. And that's it. But it's not okay. And while we can't necessarily stop them, and I think that's also one of the fundamental truths, that there is not a huge amount that we can do to stop them from targeting us. We can obviously share our experiences, we can dialogue, we can advocate for ourselves. But as it's a non-Jewish problem, the work has to be done with them. And when them, I say the non-Jewish world. And that's not non-Jewish people. I'm talking about ideology, society, culture. And absolutely, we have intergenerational trauma. I can share a story with you that happened in December of last year. My partner and I were getting pizza, and in Hong Kong, you can drink alcohol in the streets. We were not, but other people were, and they had their masks off. And there was kind of a crowd of people gathering around the pizza place, some waiting for pizza, some just chilling out. And the Hong Kong police taped off the top of the street. It's a thoroughfare. They taped off the top of the street, and then they walked down with megaphones, kind of marching, but not really, because it's, you know, it's Hong Kong. And then they taped off the bottom of the street. And I had a panic attack. And my partner isn't Jewish, so he was like, what is going on? And I said, I have to get out of here. I have to go out of here. I cannot stay here in this enclosed, trapped space. And anyway, the pizza came very quickly, and he was like, what happened? And I was like, and I've also done, as you know, we said in the introduction, a lot of work on the Holocaust. And I said, so much of my work has involved seeing pictures and videos and understanding and researching Jews be taken away or fenced in. And I don't know if I have any family that were murdered in the Shoah. That's not something that I'm aware of, but it's something that I have experienced, this trauma. And there's different types of intergenerational trauma. One is the genetic, and they say that it comes in our genomes. It's called epigenetic trauma. Yeah. And if you think about it, Jews who were born Jewish, so not Jews by choice, who are just as Jewish, of course, but there's a slight difference in this scenario. People who were born Jewish, we're the descendants of people who have survived genocide and ethnic cleansings multiple times over. So there's that aspect. And then what is the narrative in our community? We spend a huge amount of time talking about the Shoah, the murder, the pogroms, the expulsion of Jews from Arab world and Iran. We talk about these things, and we should talk about them. But what impact do they have on us? And how do we protect ourselves? And I think we protect ourselves through pride, to say, whatever they try to do to us, we still love ourselves. We still love our Jewishness. We're not going to hate it. We're not going to be ashamed. And we're also never going to see our Jewishness as a source of the problem. The problem is the non-Jewish world's attitudes to our Jewishness. But these are real conversations. You know, I had a student in my class, and last year it was a Holocaust class, and he was Jewish, but didn't have a very strong Jewish identity. And honestly, he was traumatized. He was like, this is horrible. They keep trying to kill us. How can I be proudly Jewish when this keeps happening? And this year he took another course, which was Jewish studies. And he started to see the history and the beauty and the joy and the civilization and the culture. And I really believe that's the antidote. But the other antidote is having these very important conversations. So I'm so glad you asked that, Emily. Having these conversations, giving space for us to talk about our experiences and identity without being shamed or shunned or being afraid or oh, you're just being hysterical. No, we're people who have experienced untold persecution, and that plays out in our kind of emotional responses to the world.
Absolutely, Ben. You beautifully explained that. And I find myself reflecting on my own experiences and trauma I have experienced growing up. I grew up in New York on Long Island, and we went to synagogue a couple blocks away from my house and used to walk to synagogue every Friday. And when I was in elementary school, our synagogue was vandalized. And I knew from a very early age, about swastikas and about the Holocaust and how to protect myself and code switching and all those things, because, it's very real. We do have to protect ourselves. But you say it so beautifully. We can't allow the need to protect ourselves to overstep and take away from living our authentic Jewish lives and being proud to be Jewish and celebrating the holidays openly and beautifully. Yeah,
absolutely. And Hanukkah's starting in I think about 3 weeks. It's very early this year, and I know that's like all of the Jewish conversation. Is it early or is it late? So it's very early this year, and we're instructed to light our Hanukkahot in the window. And that is a story, our story of survival, of resistance, of fighting against assimilation, of fighting against cultural genocide, and proudly proclaiming and reclaiming our Jewish identity. And how wonderful that we're instructed to put our Hanukkah in the window. And there's that really famous picture of the Hanukkah from Germany, and in the back you see the swastika. And it's, that is what Jewish pride is. And of course, we have to be careful. We have to be safe. We're not going to be irresponsible. We want people to always be safe.
Right.
But even Jewish pride can be internal. It can be inside your home. But yes, proudly proclaiming I'm a Jew and I'm proud of being a Jew is a radical act of resistance.
It is. It is. I'm going to segue to a question that's popped up in the chat, which is, how does anti-Semitism interact with broader xenophobia and or classism within the UK?
I think that's an excellent question. And I think it's not actually just in the UK. It's kind of in America also. And if we kind of do a little bit of time traveling and go to the end of the 19th century, perceptions of Jews were in some ways quite different to the way they are now. The roots of the accusations are all the same, because anti-Jewish hatred is always rooted in the same ideas, but it obviously expresses itself differently in different eras. But in the UK and also in America, when, the millions or hundreds of thousands of Ashkenazi Jews were fleeing pogroms in the Russian Empire, they were perceived as being foreigners, as being dirty, as being carriers of disease in both the United States and the UK. And actually, kind of referencing back to internalized anti-Jewishness, the Sephardic community in the UK wrote a letter, a pamphlet to the new Ashkenazi refugees saying, don't embarrass us. This is how you behave in Britain. And they were living in slums. And so that is a huge thing. And Jimmy, you're absolutely right. Classism is probably the biggest issue in the UK. And absolutely, we were seen as these kind of dirty foreigners who are, outliers in society, or we're trying to infiltrate society from within. And that's also a message we see in America. But if you look at the 19th century and the rhetoric about Jews in New York City, they were saying that New York is becoming Hebrified, and that was not a compliment. We were these foreign interlopers coming in, and yes, while there were certain Jews who had acquired wealth, the German Jews in, say, America, or the Sephardic Jews in, say, the UK, the vast majority were living in poverty and were othered in an anti-Jewish, in a classist and xenophobic way.
Absolutely. To go off of that, can you talk a little bit about the institutional, structural anti-Jewish hatred in both the UK and the US, both historically and to today?
Absolutely. And I think that, again, it's a really important question, because people see anti-Jewish hatred as something apart from these kind of, systemic structural forms of oppression. They say it's different, and it's not different. Anti-Jewish hatred formed the foundations of certain non-Jewish worlds. So that's really the Christian and the Muslim worlds. And if we take the Christian world, that was Europe, also the United States. And the Christian world doesn't necessarily mean a country who is officially Christian, because obviously we know that America has a separation of church and state, but we're talking about the ideological roots of the country. Same with South America, really anywhere that kind of was colonized by Europe, to be honest. And we saw that anti-Jewishness was used to define non-Jewish identity. And this started right at the very beginning of Christianity, because they had to market themselves. They had to say, well, why are we no longer Jews? We keep the Old Testament, but we're rejecting everything else. They had to market themselves, really. So they said the Jews are practical, we're spiritual. The Jews are physical, we're heavenly. And this started this idea, which basically became adversos Judeos, against the Jews. And to call someone a Jew was a way to insult them. And Jews were assigned tasks. We were assigned conceptual tasks that were based on ideas of Jews. So there was, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine of Hippo, excuse me, I always get them mixed up. He said the Jews are the blind man, but we're needed. He said, scatter them, but slay them not, because we need Jews, because we have to have them as a representation of what it means to be blind. And what are we blind to? We're blind to the path of Jesus. So this became deeply embedded in Christian structure. And then the roots were so deep that even after the Enlightenment, when the power of the church was swept away, these roots remained. And I explain it to my students like a weed. And the weed is growing, and then there's roots very, very, very deep into the center of the earth. And there are people who come along, both Jews and non-Jews, and they try to solve the problem, but they cut the weed off at the ground level. So what happens? It grows back. Absolutely, it grows back, and it grows back in maybe a slightly different form, because, as we said, it always fits the zeitgeist. But it is a part of the ideological way that people think about the world. And, you know, there was a British journalist, or there is a British journalist called Owen Jones, and he is a socialist, and he did a book about capitalism. And the person on the cover of that book looked a lot like anti-Jewish racist stereotypes of Jews. So it's just baked into the world. And I think that because of, you know, the dominance of American culture and how American experience has played out, and obviously in the United States, the Native American community and the Black community really were the ultimate others, there has been an inability to understand, well, how have other groups been experiencing prejudice? And in Europe, we know that the Jews are the ultimate other, and I wouldn't say that's the case in America, but it doesn't mean that they don't experience this foundational, structural, institutional Jew hate that comes across in law, in society.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ben. Hopefully we'll segue to a little less heavy of a topic. Yes. I found it really heartwarming and inspiring when you write about the experience of researching, learning, and listening to the stories of the people you interviewed for the book. You say you feel closer to the Jewish people as a whole. After all, from all corners of the world, we mark Shabbat together. I have goosebumps even just reading that again. Can you tell us about your process interviewing these individuals and learning more about the beautiful diversity of the Jewish world?
Absolutely. It was really important to me to reflect on the LGBTQ plus community. And there have been accusations in the LGBTQ plus community that it hasn't really reflected the diversity of that community. And I didn't want to make the same mistakes with regards to Jewish pride. And it was kind of clinical, to be honest. You know, I said, okay, I want someone to represent the Ashkenazi story, Sephardic, Mizrahi, and Beti Yisrael. So we started with those four, and I found the people. So I found Rachel Riley, who is a British celebrity. She presents a TV show. Chen Mazig for the Mizrahi community, Isaac De Castro for Sephardic, and Ashagar Araro for the Beti Yisrael. And then I just wanted to represent other stories. So I got in touch with Elisheva Rishon, who is a Black American Orthodox woman. I got in touch with, someone just said they love Rachel Riley. Yeah, Rachel Riley is amazing. I got in touch with Amy Albertson, who's a Chinese-American Ashkenazi Jew, and Eliyahu Lan, who is a trans-Australian Jew. And it was important for me to represent the diversity of experience, the diversity of the sub-ethnic communities, but also the diversity of the world in terms of geography. You know, as we've discussed, I grew up in Glasgow, Scotland. There was about 5,000 Jews in the whole of Scotland. And I do sometimes feel that the larger Jewish centres, so America, New York, London, of course, sometimes the smaller communities are ignored. Sometimes the smaller communities are kind of left to go under the radar. And that's not okay, because we have the same experiences as everyone else. And it was incredible, because what I saw, despite diversity in age, and gender, sexuality, and skin color, language, we had similar experiences across the board, both in terms of the negative, but most importantly, in terms of the positive. There is a global Jewish community, and there's a global Jewish experience. So, you know, Chen Mazig, who is a Mizrahi Jew, whose family are from the MENA region, he has a similar relationship with his Jewish pride to Rachel Riley, from an Ashkenazi Jew from London. You know, it's this commitment to Jewish life, commitment to Judaism in a sense, and also commitment to the land of Israel, and for fostering this pride and for fighting for the people. And I think that was the most amazing, because it's very easy, especially kind of in the day of identity politics, for us to split off and say, okay, although we're Jews, we're all very different, and that defines our experiences. And of course it does. Our experiences are different. My experience as a gay Jew is different to the experiences of a heterosexual Jew. However, and this however is important, we're all Jews. We're all part of something much bigger than us, and it's a collective project that we all must participate in. And that was really incredible. And it is amazing seeing just the beauty and the diversity and the cultural practice. And, you know, the Ethiopian Jewish community celebrated Sigd in the beginning of November, which is a Bet Israel holiday that all Jews should be marking. And I think that it's, understanding the beauty and the experience makes us feel closer, not only to ourselves, but to each other in this, as I said, this global community that exists and is remarkable because it survived for thousands of years without WhatsApp or Instagram. The continuity of the Jewish people is kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. Have you changed your religious practice or ritual in any way? I know when I went to college in Ohio, very, very teeny tiny Jewish community, but one of my near and dear friends, her family is Israeli by way of Argentina. And I went to their house for many a holiday. And, I've picked up some Sephardi traditions and Mizrahi traditions. And, I've changed my haroset recipe to include dates and oranges. And I, mix it up differently because I love not only is it so tasty, but I love the symbolism of all of that that's included. So have you, experienced something similar?
Absolutely. And I think that's what you're representing there is work. You decided to do these things. And it's not work in a negative sense, but these are active decisions because we have cultural practices. When I grew up, my recent ancestors were Ashkenazi. And I say recent ancestors because we also all share the same indigenous roots to the land of Israel. But my recent ancestors were Ashkenazi. So I, ate Ashkenazi food. And, I love it. It's like my comfort food. But as you say, there is like a plethora of amazing Jewish dishes out there. And I have to tell you a secret. I hate to cook. I really despise. The only thing I cook two things, both Jewish, shakshuka and chicken soup. But my partner, who is not Jewish, but is an amazing cook, we design the recipes together. And we host Rosh Hashanah and Pesach and the holidays and Shabbat here. And we decide which meals to make by looking through, and I Google Sephardic recipes for Rosh Hashanah, Mizrahi recipes for Pesach, because those simple acts make me feel closer, exactly what you're saying, to all of the Jewish people all over the world, because we come together to celebrate these holidays, whether we're in, England or Ethiopia or America or Algeria, and maybe not anymore with Algeria because of the Jewish community there, but historically speaking, we came together to mark these holidays. And it's so remarkable. And as you say, the food is amazing. And the culture that we belong to, the civilization and the culture that we belong to is astounding. And we should honor that and celebrate that. But exactly as you said, it's work. We have to decide to set upon pride. It won't just happen if we don't do the work. And what your story represents is that you've decided that, obviously because of your interactions, to experience more this global Jewish identity rather than just your own family story. And that's obviously so special, and we don't want to discard our own personal histories. But there is a global thing happening here that we also want to honor and be a part of.
I'm going to be showing this to my mom later, who disagreed to a point about mixing up some traditions, in part because they're so core and central to her belief. But there's so much beauty and diversity and delicious food out here in our Jewish community, and I can't wait to experience more of it over time.
Yeah. Me too, and it's the same thing I say to my partner, again, because he's the chef. I'm like, we try to have all of it. So we try to have, some Ethiopian traditions, some Mizrahi, Sephardic, because, my Jewish life here is actually quite small. Most of my friends are not Jewish. So when I'm hosting these holidays, I'm hosting non-Jewish people. Often I'm the only Jew there, but I feel such immense pride to be like, look at this civilization, this culture, look at what we have produced, look at these stories. And it's that sharing just kind of makes me brim with pride. It feels wonderful.
Absolutely. My parents always tasked me with being, the champion of Jewish holidays growing up. Even in kindergarten, I was bringing dreidels and gelt to class, and we had a whole, learning about Hanukkah session. I was 5, but very proud to do it. And it's funny, some of my classmates still bring it up to this day. About that was their first interaction learning about Jewish life. It's so in the moment, I was silly, just teaching a game that we've played, my whole life. But to see that ripple effect of the impact it's had on especially non-Jewish people is so, so powerful.
And what you're touching on there again is this responsibility we all have. Because, Jewishness and Judaism, we are a people and a religion of action. It's not passive. So we have to honor these holidays actively. And we do have a responsibility to educate the people around us, if they're willing to learn, of course. But, it's because, especially growing up in Glasgow in Scotland, or even being in Hong Kong, I'm the first Jew that many people have met. So it is a responsibility, but it's not a responsibility that I feel is overwhelming or causes me struggle. I love it. I love being an ambassador for our people because I really think that I just love being Jewish so much. So I'm so proud to share it.
That's amazing. Amazing. And I hope all the folks on this call hear that loud and clear, and embrace that mentality as well. I see another question in the chat. Please keep them coming. We love questions here. The question is, when or how did you go from saying, quote, "I'm Jewish, but," to realizing your Jewish pride?
I think it was during the Corbyn experience, because that was the shock that kind of rocked the Jewish world in Britain, like kind of maybe similarly to what's happening in America currently, because we all thought, I think America slightly more so, but not really that much. We all thought we'd made it. We're like, we're British, it's cool. We know that there's anti-Semitism, but it's on the kind of the fringes of society. We're free to be British and Jewish, and it's great. And actually what that experience showed us is that there is, again, this historic Jewish experience that we're a part of. We have not escaped from it. And I was just so outraged. I thought, how dare they treat us like this? How dare they try and change our identity? Because that's what they're doing, trying to strip us of our indigeneity, make us ashamed of being Zionist, make us ashamed of being proud Jews wanting to advocate for ourselves. And I just thought, how dare they? I was really like my mind was boggled that they were trying to do this to us, even though we knew the non-Jewish world have been doing it for millennia. I just thought, absolutely not, and I will not internalize this. I will not accept this, because it made me reflect on my Jewish identity, because it was, what am I fighting for? I'm going online every day, still to this day, and I'm fighting for our people. What am I doing? I'm doing it because I believe in the Jewish people. I believe that we are an amazing, beautiful, resilient culture, or cultures that have survived for millennia. And that's something I'm proud to be a part of. And that's something I want to ensure continues in the future. Because that's really it. How can we know what we're fighting for if we don't celebrate, if we don't understand what it means to be Jewish? And a big part of that was saying, I'm not Jewish, but I'm Jewish, period. That was it. And that defiance was so important for me in developing this book, because I was like, no, I'm sorry. I don't say I'm gay, but I'm not a drag queen. I don't say those things because that's internalized homophobia. It's not okay. And it's absolutely not okay with regards to our Jewish identity. And it's this, I don't say that to shame people who have said I'm Jewish, but, or who say it, because that was my experience too. But we have to come together to do the collective and the individual work to realize, no, it's unacceptable. They can't treat us like this. And then for us to agree and internalize it, absolutely not.
Couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't. There's a quote in here that's helped me reflect on my career journey with ADL, with the Anti-Defamation League, a bit. I'm one of two people in the state who respond to every single incident report that comes our way, over 170 last year, and we're on track to surpass that this year. And it's both a challenging, very challenging, but rewarding job. And I've personally found myself digging deeper into tradition and celebration of holiday specifically to help me through this time in my career. But there's a quote in your book that says, quote, "We should never be shamed into feeling guilty for focusing our attention on combating anti-Semitism and supporting the Jewish community. We are able to do this and support other communities." What do you tell people, especially young Jewish activists, that empowers and inspires them to continue to show up as their authentic Jewish selves, especially in social justice spaces?
I think it's a really excellent, and it's difficult because we have been taught for a couple of hundred years now that Jewish specificity is wrong. The non-Jewish world following the Enlightenment said to us, you've got to be universal, and if you're not, we're going to chuck you out. So we trained ourselves, we warped ourselves, we changed ourselves to be universal. And actually, we are specific. We have specific beliefs, practices, traditions, laws, all of it. And that's not to say that we're not also members of the wider world. We are, but we're members of the wider world as proud Jews. And I do think that the social justice community, the progressive world, is making it very difficult for Jews to be proudly Jewish, proudly Zionist, while standing up for other communities. And my perspective on this is, I don't describe myself as a progressive any longer. Or rather, I say, let me correct that. I would say I'm not a member of the progressive community any longer. But that doesn't change my values. I will still talk about anti-Black racism. I'll still talk about LGBTQ plus phobia, also because I'm a gay man also. Misogyny. I teach these things in my classes. You know, we had conversations about the Texas law that passed. And that for me is how I am an ally, but I will never compromise my Jewishness to stand up for another community. And that's not selfish, it's called survival. There was this incredible Tunisian French Jewish writer called Albert Memmi, who I quote countless times in the book, and he's kind of my intellectual crush. And he was a Tunisian, as I said, and he fought for the Tunisian independence movement against the French. And you know, he was a young Jewish progressive, and he said, I'm also a Tunisian. And what he said was the old Jews in the ghetto, again, his words, they said, leave it alone. This is not going to help us. This is not going to be positive for us. And he said, no, I'm a Tunisian. I'm modern. I'm going to do this. So he did. And then what happened? The new Tunisian state expelled the Jews. And he said, our responsibility to other people must never lead us to forget our historic responsibility to ourselves. You can do both, absolutely. You can stand up for yourselves primarily, and I believe that we should primarily stand up for ourselves because we need the support, we need the fight. But you can also stand up for other communities without compromising. But that might mean you have to leave spaces which ask you to compromise. But not being in the progressive community or the social justice community does not mean anything for your ability to be an ally to other communities. And that's just the reality. We get to define our identity and our experience, and we don't need to be told, well, you're no longer a part of our community, so therefore all of your progressive values are gone. No, if you're a progressive, continue to be a progressive, but be a progressive on your terms. Do not let anyone dictate to you, because often, as we're seeing now, and nearly always, unfortunately, we're seeing that come at a cost to our Jewishness. I'm not going to sacrifice the Jewish people to stand up for others. I will do both work, but I will focus myself on the Jewish people because I'm a Jew, and that's not a weird or a wrong thing to say. Other communities do the same thing. Gay men primarily advocate for gay men or the wider LGBTQ plus community. The Black community will, advocate, most specifically for the Black community, which is right and it makes sense. So why is it different for us?
I think it's a good question that a lot of us need to reflect on. And
yeah.
I always tell folks, I will continue to show up. These are my values and my beliefs that, to create the world that I believe we are capable of. I must and will continue to show up to defend the rights of all people. But I don't have to work with every single group under the sun, especially those who do not share those same values.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's such an important message, because we see, especially young college students, being put in this bind of, what do I do? Am I a Zionist? Am I a Jew? Or am I a progressive? You can be both. You do it on your terms. But yeah, I'm the same. I will not advocate for movements or communities or organizations that I see as being detrimental to my own community. I'm not a cow supporting the butcher. To put it bluntly.
We're getting a question about Israel, and I also have one teed up for this time too. My question is, we're going to do it twofold. My question is, how do you navigate but Israel does XYZ type of a conversation we have an audience member who's asking, does the topic of Israel come up with your contemporaries, and how do you handle it?
So I'll say that yes, it does come up, and I try to handle it by being, as much as I can, and yeah, I do have bias, but as much as I can, objective with the facts. So actually yesterday, this wasn't with my contemporaries, but yesterday and the day before, I covered the origins of the Israeli-Arab conflict in my Jewish studies class, because we've done the history of the Jews, and now we're coming to the end of the course. And we looked at the history and what we know is provable, and a lot of them were like, wow, we didn't know this. This is not the narrative that's put out. And it's like, no, you're absolutely right. For me, the way I will, define my Jewishness with regards to Israel is say that I'm indigenous to the land of Israel. That is provable. We can prove it through DNA tests. We can prove it through culture, language, festivals, origins, archaeology. It's all there. It's all there. Israel today is a modern state that I also support. I'm a Zionist. Does that mean I like every single thing the Israeli government does? No, of course not. But that does not in any way make me waver in my support for the Jewish state, because there's also things the British government does that I don't like, or the American, or the French, or the German, or whoever. Israel is a modern country, and this is the difficulty. And actually, I mentioned my friend there who said she cries when she leaves Israel, but she doesn't feel quite at home there and doesn't feel quite at home in America. It's the same thing. I'm not an Israeli. So there are parts of that experience that don't necessarily apply to me, but I'm a Jew and I'm a Zionist, and that is my homeland. So I state that very clearly. And I also frame it with regards to things like Zionism. I say Zionism is a Jewish concept created by Jews, for Jews, and it's integral to Jewish identity, and actually always has been, even before the advent of modern political Zionism. So who gets to tell me what that is? It's the Jewish community. I will not tolerate heterosexuals telling me what it means to be a gay man, and I certainly won't tolerate non-Jews telling me what Zionism means. And I think with regards to what Israel does, there are certain things that we should criticize if we disagree with, but I think it's always about, even inside ourselves, doing the work to understand why might we be having reactions? Because I think a lot of people have very emotional reactions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And sometimes our reactions are just like, well, we're connected to that land and this is horrible to see. But sometimes it's because we're trained to have emotional reactions with regards to the different parties involved. So we have to look inside ourselves and say, yeah, Israel might do things I disagree with, but actually so do the Palestinians in very real ways. Or the Palestinian Authority, or Hamas, and I still think they should have a state. And I think it's again about getting to the core of the conversation. The conversation on Israel, really, from my perspective, is not about Israeli action. It's about Jews. And in May, I saw this kind of fascinating thing. I was also teaching a class on the Holocaust, it was quite a difficult time emotionally. And the war had started, and I saw this grassroots uprising. And it was global, as we all know. But I also, about a week before the war started, I taught a class about how in 1933, the German people, the society, rose up against Jews at a grassroots level just after the Nazis were elected against what they called a Jüdischer Geist, Jewish spirit. And then in 1941, with the Operation Barbarossa, we saw the non-Jewish civilians in the Baltic states rise up against the Jews in a grassroots manner. These grassroots uprisings are a pattern, and it's about us as Jews. And now Israel is treated as the collective Jew, so that is now one of the major conduits for Jew hate. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, it doesn't mean that we have to, what I'm trying to say is that this was a grassroots uprising. It had nothing to do with Israeli action. It was about Jews. So that's how I talk to people. And of course, I try to be objective and I say, listen, we'll mourn the dead in Palestine or with the Palestinians. We're going to criticize Israel where criticism is due, but I'm not going to condemn it because I don't believe really that, overall it's worthy of condemnation. Even if I'm very harshly criticizing policy, I'm not going to withdraw my support for the concept of a state because I understand what this is about, and it's about Jews. I mean, Israel could sign itself away into oblivion, and I think people would still hate it. Genuinely.
I mean, Jew hatred has been around, pre-destruction, post-destruction, and again during this, post-Israel statehood time as well, and hopefully, doesn't continue for another millennium, but we're on track for that to happen too.
We are, and people think that's. I'm kind of known at my school for teaching depressing classes. And the first half of this book and my second book, they're pretty depressing. But the hopeful message is, it doesn't matter what they say. We're going to fight for our Jewishness. We're going to love our Jewishness. We're going to empower other Jews, protect other Jews, and advocate for ourselves, because we know the way they treat us is wrong. So whether it continues for another millennia or not, yes, we would of course rather it doesn't, and it's hard and it traumatizes us, but it's not going to impact our Jewish pride. We're going to love ourselves regardless of what they say, because we are a specific community and we need to have conversations about us and our diversity and our beauty and our pride, whether they're hating us or not. And I know that maybe sounds a little bit morbid, but I really believe it's true. The Jewish pride seen in the resistance during the Shoah, or the fact that they still lit Chanukiot when they could, or observe Shabbat or Yom Kippur, is such an incredible sign of, well, how do we navigate this world? We navigate this world by loving our Jewishness regardless.
I'm going to reflect back a quote of yours from the last chapter of your book. And it says, "The reality is we survived, not by accident, but because we fought back against anti-Semitic oppression. We defended being Jewish, sometimes at the highest of costs. And the reality is we survive to this day because our ancestors resisted anti-Semitism and defended the Jewish people." Tell me how people can do the work of Jewish pride and continue this legacy.
Well, I think the first is doing the work. Look inside yourselves and say, do I really feel pride in every area? Are there places I feel shame? Have I said Jewish but? Have I said Zionist but? And if you find that the answer is yes, don't feel shame. We're responding to deeply embedded institutional hate. So most of us have felt that at some stage, and it's not our fault. So that work is really important. And the second thing, exactly what you had mentioned, it's about being actively Jewish. You can't see because my hair is so big, but I'm wearing a kippah right now. And I wear a kippah every single day because that's how I show the world that I'm a proud Jew. I have my Chanukiah. I'm going to put that in the window of my 18th floor apartment. So whether it's the Shabbat candles or kosher or kashrut or Shomer Shabbat or whatever, we're going to embrace our Jewishness in an active, tangible way, because we are an active people. And Jewish pride, Jewish activity, when the world tries to shame us for it, is a radical act of resistance. And then the last one, I would say, if you feel comfortable, if you feel able, raise your voice up, educate. And that doesn't mean everyone has to go online and, be like me on Twitter, but educate the people around you. Have conversations. Start making this a real and active part of your life. Because as Jews, sometimes it can become this thing on the side that we honor a couple of times a year. And this isn't me not saying to everyone, no, you have to believe in God and you have to do all these things, but we are a part of a people who fought back. And we fought back not just through advocacy, but we fought back through clinging desperately to our traditions and our customs and our actions. And we must continue that today. And that to me is real Jewish pride. Whether people add their voices to the fray or not, the fact that every single Shabbat, the Jewish people come together and light the candles wherever we are in the world, that is remarkable, and that's the work that we have to do, and that is how we connect to one another. And yes, we should fight back, but that is by fighting back. So I'd say those three steps, and really do the work. Writing this book about internalized anti-Jewishness, I've had to really reflect on my own experiences. Jewish but, Zionist but, and that's me trying to show, look guys, I'm still like you. I'm still cool. I'm still like in the non-Jewish club. I don't care, actually. I don't care if they like me or think that I'm X, Y, or Z, because I'm a proud Jew, and I'm not going to say I'm Jewish but to throw a whole section of our society under the bus just so I'm accepted. That's unacceptable. And I will embrace the Orthodox. I'll embrace every aspect of our community because we are one people. Am echad.
It's so refreshing to hear you say that, because my experience working on campus as a Hillel professional, I heard all the time that, oh, I'm a bad Jew, I don't keep kosher, or, I'm just a Rosh Hashanah Jew, I only come on the high holidays. Even myself, I'll catch myself saying some of those things too, but it's so important for us as a Jewish community to make sure that we are not subjecting ourselves to that shame, and not limiting or saying who is or who is not Jewish, and demoralizing folks within our own community. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience as an adoptee. I know it was very deeply ingrained trauma of people telling me that I wasn't really Jewish because I was adopted. And that is so wrong. And that's coming from within our own community. And we need to do that work within a community, within ourselves individually, to make sure that all of those Jews who are born Jewish, Jews by choice, Jews who are adopted like myself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are embraced and loved, and continue this rich and beautiful tradition and celebration of Jewish life.
Absolutely, because we're richer because you're Jewish. Our community is richer that you're a part of our community. Look what you're doing. That's the truth. And yes, we are a rule-driven society, but we cannot take these rules in a way which, A, they were never meant, and B, in a way which is callous and cruel and gatekeeping to people who are part of our community, part of the Jewish people. There are many Jews who are not considered to be halakhically Jewish. And that's fine. We're not going to change the halakha, nor really am I wanting to. I think the halakha is important, obviously, but we're also not going to erase the reality of Jewish peoplehood, and the fact that we are part of this incredible people, a civilization, a culture, and we are richer because of people like you. And also in terms of Jews by choice, let's look at Ruth. This is a part of our story, a part of our people. We're not going to gatekeep, we're not going to exclude, and we're going to do the work internally. Our community does have some areas in which it could improve. We have issues with misogyny, LGBTQ plus phobia, gatekeeping, anti-Black racism. And I don't say that to end this talk on a negative note. I say it because pride is the solution. Jewish pride is the way that we embrace all Jews. We embrace ourselves. We embrace action. We embrace traditions. And in a way that suits us. We're not all going to be Jewish in the same way. And that's absolutely fine. But it's about every single one of us doing the individual work, as well as coming together as a collective to create this pride movement. Because this pride movement, it has to be the future of the Jewish people. We're at a crossroads. We've once again seen, the resurgence of Jew hate. And I say often, it's not rising, it's risen. In America, in France, in the UK, all over the world. And we have a choice now. Are we going to come together and defend ourselves with pride? Or are we going to accept the narratives imposed onto us? And it has to be that we accept and embody and share and empower through pride. That has to be. There's no other option. We don't have another option, because one will eventually lead to the dissipation of the Jewish people, and one will lead us to continuing for 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 more years. Each of us is a thread in a much greater tapestry of Jewishness that stretches back thousands of years. And it is our job as Jews today to make sure that tapestry continues into the future.
So a beautiful painting in my head. It's bringing up the memories of the very first time I went to the Western Wall, the Kotel, when I was on a birthright trip. And I'm not a particularly spiritual person, but standing on those stones in the old city where millions of people, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Jews have been and stood and prayed and wished for a better world is just so powerful, and is one of my most proud memories of being a part of the people that have been a part of that process for so long. It never felt so connected to my Jewishness than in that moment. And I hope more folks, especially after hearing you and reading your book, dig into that and find those experiences and embrace their Jewish identities.
Absolutely. And if we circle back, which is, I think, is a phrase we're all familiar now with through Zoom, to what we said at the beginning about we survived, or they tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. They tried to kill us, we survived because we made it so. Now let's eat.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ben. If there are
Thank you.
any last second questions, please get them in before our time is over. But I know it's been a great honor to speak with you, Ben. Inspiring to hear your wisdom, read your words, and I can't wait to read the next book.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to talk to you. And this is also the amazing thing, is that you're from New York, working in Detroit. I'm a Scottish Jew living in Hong Kong, and here we are coming together. That itself is something to celebrate, because yes, we've all stood in the Kotel and we've all, prayed at the Western Wall, but we're also, look at what we're doing here. These conversations about Jewish identity, this is the Jewish future. And it's so thrilling. And people say to me, do you have hope amongst the horrendous experiences we're having currently? And I say, I have enormous hope, because look at what we're doing. We're coming together and we're saying our Jewishness is a source of pride and not shame, period.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben and Emily, for being with us and for such a wonderfully enriching discussion. And thanks to all of you at home for joining us tonight. Our next event is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Stockholm, The Adrenaline-Fueled Adventures of an Accidental Scientist by Robert Lefkowitz. That's Thursday, tomorrow, November 11th at 1:30 p.m. And remember to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org/bookfair for our full schedule, ways to get involved, and to buy books. See you tomorrow. Thank you.